Today, we will be looking at a romantic drama called Belle. The beginning of the film opens in the year 1769, when England is still a slave economy. We see Captain Sir John Lindsay navigating through a slum. He has come to retrieve his young biracial daughter, Dido Elizabeth Belle, whose mother, a slave, has died. Though this is the first time they have met, he earns her trust by offering her some candy and tells her he is taking her to the real life she was born to. He brings her to the home of his uncle, Lord Mansfield, the highest judge in the land, who lives there with his wife Lady Mansfield, spinster sister Lady Mary Murray, and their niece Elizabeth Murray, who they are fostering now that her father has remarried. Though the Mansfields are shocked that Lindsay's child is black, he convinces them that it is her right as a member of the Lindsay family to live at the family estate. Once they agree to this, he tearfully says goodbye to Dido as he is bound on a long voyage. He tells her to remember how much she is loved. Dido is in the portrait gallery where she sees the painting of an ancestor with a black servant staring up at him. She doesn't like what she sees and is uncomfortable with the portrait. A while later, she and Elizabeth play together while Lord and Lady Mansfield watch. While Lord Mansfield points out that Dido's bloodline gives her the right to be here. Lady Mansfield asks whether if her skin color is more important than her noble blood and wonders what will happen to Dido when the Mansfields are no longer there to protect her. Most women would marry, but they fear that anyone willing to overlook her race would mistreat her. They also worry about Elizabeth's prospects, whose father has basically abandoned her. In a blink of an eye, 10 years have passed. Dido and Elizabeth have grown into bright young women and are the best of friends. One day, however, Lord Mansfield delivers bad news to Dido that her father has died. However, he has also left her a big inheritance, making her a rich heiress and suddenly an attractive marriage prospect. She is stunned by the news and Elizabeth is excited for her even though her own future is very insecure, after being disinherited by her own father in favor of his new family. The Mansfields decide to throw a dinner party hoping to find a young man interested in Elizabeth. Dido is pleased with this until she is reminded that while she dines with the family when they are alone, it is not proper for her to be at a formal dinner with other guests because she's black. She can, however, join them as they relax after dinner. That night, Lady Ashcroft and her sons James and Oliver come to dinner. The mother and her eldest son James are clearly very racist and only interested in finding a rich wife. At dinner, Lady Ashcroft interrogates Lord Mansfield about a case he is hearing in court about a ship called the Zone, but he will not talk about it. Meanwhile, Dido is walking through the grounds while she waits for everyone to finish dinner. She is startled by a noise and rushes back to the house. Moments later, the young man who startled her, John Davinia, arrives with a message for Lord Mansfield from his father. Dido, still shocked, is very rude to him and he leaves. Finally, the guests finish dinner and meet Dido in the drawing room. Lady Ashcroft and James are horrified by the sight of her, but Oliver finds her exotic and interesting. And when he tells his mother about Dido's inheritance, her attitude changes and is suddenly much more willing to have a black daughter-in-law. Elizabeth, meanwhile, has become totally smitten with James. The next day, Dido finds her uncle talking with Davinia, the man from the previous night. It turns out he wants to train under Lord Mansfield as a lawyer. As a poor man, he cannot afford to set himself up. He speaks passionately about wanting to change England for the better. Lord Mansfield is unconvinced and he asks Dido what she thinks. She speaks highly of him despite their previous encounter because we see him seek her out later to thank him. However, they have another misunderstanding and argue again. Later, Dido discovers that her uncle has commissioned a painter to do a portrait of herself and Elizabeth. She is upset as the only paintings she has seen of a black person shows them much below a white person in status. As they sit for the painter, she and Elizabeth talk about James and Oliver Ashcroft. Dido once again hears mention of the Zone case her uncle is trying in court, but no one will tell her about it. Leaving another sitting a few days later, she runs into Mr. Davinia. She asks him to tell her about the zone. He is shocked no one in the house has told her. The Zone was a slave ship that threw its slaves overboard still alive and chained, citing that it did not have enough water for both the sailors and the slaves. The insurance company is refusing to pay for the lost slaves and Lord Mansfield is hearing the case. Dido is horrified by this and he agrees with her. Later she confronts her uncle about the case, but he insists there are many angles and is angry that someone told her. He angrily dismisses Davinia as his student, especially after he seems to suggest that he would like to marry Dido since their attraction has been growing. Dido is sad to discover Davinia has left without saying goodbye. Sometime later, Lord and Lady Mansfield take Dido and Elizabeth into separate rooms to tell them that the family will be going to London soon. The girls are overjoyed, assuming they will be introduced to society as official marriage prospects. But the girls are told that this is not the case. Elizabeth will have her coming out but Dido will not. Lord Mansfield basically tells Dido that any man who would overlook her race to marry her would just be after her fortune and would not be good to her. When Elizabeth and Dido see each other again, they embrace and Elizabeth tells Dido she is so sorry. When they get to London, they meet again with Lady Ashcroft and her sons. Oliver asks Dido if she would like to walk in the gardens with him. James says it wouldn't be appropriate but Dido agrees just to spite him. That night in the gardens, James continues to charm Elizabeth, though it is clear he is only interested in the money he thinks she will inherit. When Lady Ashcroft mentions this to Lady Mansfield and Lady Mary, they are forced to reveal the truth that Elizabeth will have no dowry. Meanwhile, Oliver and Dido grow close until he begins to talk about how much he loves her despite her race and origins. She is hurt that he views her race as a disadvantage, but tries to hide it. Suddenly she recognizes Davinia in the crowd. She slips away from Oliver and goes to speak with him. He tells her he has now joined a group of young men trying to spread information about the Zone case with the hope that should Lord Mansfield rule against the traders, it will strike a blow to the trade in England. They are both very happy to see each other again. Since he learned of her poverty, James has stopped visiting Elizabeth, who still believes he loves her. Oliver, however, continues to court Dido even as she begins to secretly visit Davinia to help him with his cause. Eventually, Oliver proposes to Dido, who is taken aback but agrees. Elizabeth, however, is disappointed that Dido, who did not even need to marry because of her wealth, has also secured a husband and Elizabeth has not. Still, the girls remain friends. After her engagement, Dido sees Davinia again to tell him of the news and says she has been doubly blessed to be a free black person in a slave nation and a woman with the income not to need a husband. However, she would still like to have a marriage of equals where she and her husband can be partners. She talks about how little she knows of her mother except for the color of her skin. Davinia responds saying that her mother is surely beautiful, a very different response from Oliver's way of overlooking her heritage. Dido decides to sneak into her uncle's office to see if she can find any evidence for Davinia. What she discovers is a map showing that the slave owners were negligent, and that they knew their slaves are more valuable dead and insured than sold on the market. Later, at a garden party, James Ashcroft corners Dido and tells her he will never accept her as his sister-in-law. He reveals how little he cares for Elizabeth and shows his disdain by grabbing Dido's arm and shoving his hand under her dress. She is sickened by him. Later, when she tries to tell Elizabeth about it, her cousin refuses to believe her and they fight for the first time. Lord Mansfield has also discovered that Dido has been visiting Davinia, and he confronts the two of them. Davinia expresses his love for Dido, but Mansfield said that as a poor man, he could never marry her. Dido is furious and disappointed with her uncle both for his treatment of Davinia and the possibility that he will side with the slave owners. She softens a little, however, when he shows her the finished portrait he commissioned. She and Elizabeth have been painted side by side as equals. We then see Lord Mansfield talking to a colleague about the case. He is torn because he knows the slavers are in the wrong, but if he rules against them, it might cripple the nation's economy. Dido chooses to break off her engagement to Oliver, who is sad but understands, and Elizabeth learns of James's betrayal when she reads of his marriage to another woman in the newspaper. The girls finally make up. At last the day for Lord Mansfield to give his verdict arrives. Both Dido and Davinia are in the audience. At first it seems as though he will acquit the slavers, but he condemns them and the whole practice of slavery. Dido and Davinia are overjoyed by the ruling. They meet Lord Mansfield outside the courthouse, where he tells them that he will again take Davinia on as his apprentice, which will give him the income to marry Dido. The movie ends with Lord Mansfield's ruling in the Zone case, marking the beginning of the end of slavery in England, that Dido and Davinia married, and that Elizabeth too eventually became a wife and mother. It ends with the real portrait of Dido and Elizabeth. We hope you enjoyed this recap. Give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for the latest uploads.